Redraft season is fast approaching, so it's time to put current ADP to the test. And I am joined by Ian and Pete of the JMD Podcast for our first redraft show of the year. Pete is drafting from 5, Ian from 10, and I'm going for the 12. Should we just kick things off straight away and get going, gentlemen?
I'm happy with that, yeah.
Right, so let's start things up. We are against some computer teams just to put that redraft to the test. So first off the board, I mean, it goes as we'd expect. A lot of drafts go at this point. Jefferson and Chase off the board 1 and 2. I think we'll see a lot of that through the offseason. Saquon, a lot of people's early 101, I think at the end of last season, was nailed on as the 101. The 101 curse for the previous year will maybe haunt him this year. Who shall see? Amon-Ra St. Brown as well. So, Pete, you are with our first pick. Which of those would you have been nailed on? Would you have been tempted by Amon-Ra or Saquon had they still been sat there?
No, there's only 2 players I want in redraft. One of them's Jamar Chase, who I'm assuming I'm not going to get unless I'm usually 101, and the other one's CeeDee Lamb. So I'm going to start with CeeDee Lamb. They're my 2 favourites going into this year.
Although obviously 5 is a high pick, CeeDee Lamb just gives me vibes he's going to be potentially a little bit of you can't say value and it's still going in the middle of the first round, but that seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it, taking CeeDee Lamb in the middle of the first, even at this stage of the season?
Yeah, I think the only thing that goes wrong for CeeDee Lamb is if Dak gets injured again. So if he doesn't, they've shown they've got the connection and he's going to put up big numbers. So I'm happy with that.
But they have got Joe Milton to back Dak up, who I love.
Absolutely, it just can't go wrong for Lamb, can it?
No, he's nailed on.
Gibbs off next, followed by Bijan. Gibbs, I think, is my early sneaky pick for who I would put the money on 101 overall this season. It's always a player that sort of goes around that part of round 1, isn't it, that tends to get it. And I think he's a sneaky pick. And then followed by Bijan, who would also be around that sort of area. Puka Nacua and Malik Neighbours off. That feels a little bit high for Malik Neighbours, maybe for me with current redraft. Dynasty, we've seen him go there all over the place. That makes perfect sense. Yeah, it may feel a bit risky for me. Ian, who are you looking at the 110?
So I'm looking at, as much as I like Derrick Henry, I'm more tempted towards Jonty at this point. I just think the workload he's going to get is going to be outrageous. But I also quite like the look of Nico Collins here at 10. I think he's going to get tons of volume. Joe Mixon's production dropped off a cliff last year, so he's going to get less snaps to just put in Nick Chubb. I think they're going to go more aerial this year, so I'm going to take Nico Collins.
I'm so glad you've said that, because when you mentioned Genty, that's what I was having a look at for my 112. So I'm glad he's still there. But yeah, you're right. Collins really just came through, didn't he, last season? And there's surely not a great deal to stop him carrying on again. Biggie, if CJ Stroud, do we think this year, do you think he'll get back to something closer to year 1, or did we see the real baseline last year?
I think if they can sort the O-line out, because H, who's on our podcast, he's a Texans fan, and his main issue with the Texans right now is the O-line. And if they can't keep CJ Stroud on his feet, then he's not got much chance, because they were just a turnstile for them last year.
I think we talked about it last week, I think, on our pod, but I think we're all in agreement on the JMD pod that CJ Stroud's probably halfway between year 1 and year 2. The truth is in the middle somewhere, so possibly not as good as his rookie year. But I think he'll have a bit of a bounce back from last year and be a little bit better going into year 3.
Yeah, I think it's certainly there for him, isn't it? And it looks like he's nailed on for the future there. So he's certainly not going to be looking over his shoulder at this point. At the 112, so the reason I just want to go for 112 is because for mocks, for me, I like to see how teams work out when they go ways that I maybe wouldn't ordinarily go. And Genty is a player that absolutely I'm thinking of here, but I must say CMC at 12 seems like he could be a screaming value or massively let you down. We've said this, I can't remember who it was we spoke about when you joined me on the last show, Pete, but there's those players that you just think they're not going to be that exact value point at the end of the season. They'll either far exceed or absolutely plummet. But I want to try something different. So I would never usually be thinking about drafting a rookie running back at this point. I'm going to go for Genty just to see what happens, how my team looks. And then I'm going to do something else that I would never usually at this point, but I want to see how that shapes out. I'm going to go for an early tight end. And I was very, very against Laporta last year. He felt very overpriced, and I just didn't see it being quite the same season. Brock Bowers, surely the volume he is in line for, he is still going to return value as the tight end one. Whether it's quite as good last season, I don't know. But I'm going Bowers here. So I'm going for quite a risky start for my usual draft strategy with JMD Bowers. I just want to see how it turns out.
You've hurt Ian with that. You really hurt Ian.
Yeah, I do. I am a massive Brock Bowers fan, and I was high on him last year, and he single-handedly won me a couple of leagues, to be fair, because I got him as much as I could. I gave away a load of draft picks in one of my dynasty leagues just to get Bowers, and it worked out for me. So coming back, I am going to take CMC, which you didn't take first round, and I will either win all my leagues or lose every single one because of Christian McCaffrey this year.
Yeah, great show. I mean, apologies to the viewers at this point, because I'd forgotten to put the draft board up on the screen. A little bit of technical ignorance on my part there. So we got the board back on. But yeah, CMC, at that stage, it's just the ceiling is too tempting not to take a gamble, isn't it, at that point? It really, really is. Is this one you're going to be targeting a lot, or someone you think you might end up with a lot just because you can't say no?
No, I'm actively targeting him. I think on our last week's pod, we were looking at values. And I think where CMC is currently, his current ADP, I think is massively undervalued if he returns to anything like he was, not last year, but the year before.
Do you guys think he will rise as we get closer to the start of the season? As you know, I mean, we all draft with people who aren't as 12 months of the year as we are, like doing this all the time. Those people who come back in July and August and are just looking at it for the first time and going, why would you not have CMC higher than that? And then do you think that'll cause his ADP to rise and he'll get back into the first round?
Oh yeah, I certainly think that'll be one of the reasons. I also think that every single league will have somebody who believes he's going to have a mega season again. So I think there's always going to be someone that is going to take him in the first. I mean, could you see him going in the first half? I think absolutely, there's a case to be made for it. It doesn't like it's going to happen in a minute, but yeah, you're right. That big name value, there's always going to be someone there. But there's also going to be people that would refuse to admit they're taking him at any point because of how much he's disappointed them. Last time people let him drop, he absolutely smashed it, didn't he, that season?
Yeah, I just think as a second round pick, it's like whenever I do a mock, I look at the team with McCaffrey in as a second round pick, and I think that team looks strongest when you get through 5 or 6 rounds. It's just like he's the one player that you think could finish as the 101, and in fantasy football, he's done it before. He can do it again.
Yeah, you mentioned like the full-time fantasy players like ourselves and the people that create content and live their lives in the fantasy world. I think there's also the people out there that, part-time just dip the toes in fantasy and they draft by name only. And I think they'll see CMC that far down and they will reach for him because it's purely because it's CMC. Yeah,
the same reason that there will be drafts where we see D-Hop going very high because he's a big name player who's landed on a contender, isn't he? So next up, did that time out there, Pete, or that was the pick you'd made for McConkey?
I got there in the end. I'll be perfectly honest, I was umming and ahhing as to whether I would take McBride at that point. And I've just decided it's a little bit too early. So I went Lad McConkey instead. It was McConkey, McBride, or Bucky Irving, and I'm just not as high on Bucky Irving as everybody else seems to be. So that's a bit high for me. I really, really wanted to take Trey McBride, but then I thought, I don't know, it just makes me a bit nervous at that sort of second round tight end value. Just seems a little bit like you're going to suffer with the rest of your team later on.
Yeah, so we've got Josh Allen's gone at the 2.7, Lamar Jackson, our second QB, off at 2.10. Coin toss for the 101, both obviously the 2 tier 1 quarterbacks in the draft this year. McConkey, yeah, even with the addition of Harris, he looks like he's going to be in for solid volume as well. Irving, then Jacobs, McBride, who you were debating, has gone at the end there, followed by Jonathan Taylor, and then Williams, Tyreek Hill. for so many question marks at this point, I would not even slightly consider Tyreek Hill at that point. There's a lot to be on, and maybe as we move through the off season, we get a bit more certainty. He could be very happy with them there. Potentially, we could be even more concerned, and he could drop further. And then JSN at 3-4. So, Pete, you've had CeeDee Lamb and McConkey. You've got a solid start to your wide receivers. Where are you going for your third pick?
Honestly, so this is where you do mocks. Had I looked at had I thought those wide receivers would drop that are now available, I probably wouldn't have taken a wide receiver in the second, because I like Garrett Wilson and I like Marvin Harrison. And then, so it's them or running back. I've got too much invested in Breece Hall to be taking more of Breece Hall. I'm a little bit concerned about how many teams he's already on dynasty-wise, so I'm going to try and stay clear of him in redraft this year. I do like Chase Brown, but do you know what? I'm going to start with another wide receiver and go Garrett Wilson.
And Garrett Wilson's another one.
That's worked out beautifully for me as well, to be fair.
Garrett Wilson's decent value there, I think. I would definitely be taking him over Higgins and Evans at that point. So that seems about the right place. And he could be someone that once again could return solid value. Daniel's then Terry McLaurin off. So if that's worked out well for you, who is it you are glad has fallen into your lap at 310?
Well, it's Chase Brown. I'm a Bengals fan, and me and Pete have different approaches to the way we draft. And Pete goes very receiver heavy at the beginning of drafts, and I go very running back heavy. I think there's less to choose from the running back point of view, whereas you can easily find value in receivers later on in the draft. So I'll try and box off my running backs in the early rounds. So I was always taking 2 running backs and a receiver in the first 3 rounds, which means I'm taking one now, and it's got to be Chase Brown.
Yeah, Chase Brown. So when on his rookie season, Ed was adamant as a Bengals fan that Chase Brown was going to be the real deal from the get-go. I think he made some outlandish comment like he was going to he would return value for being like a top 5 rookie pick, and Tom and I laughed at him. In hindsight, with that draft class, you'd have looked stupid year 1, but it'd have worked out all right for you long term actually if you'd taken him at that point, wouldn't it?
But I mean, yeah, right now he's basically got the backfield to himself. He's competing with Zach Moss and RJP Ryan, and now another rookie 5th round pick in Taj Brooks. So the job's his to lose. And after what we saw last year, I can't see him losing it.
I was really hoping Marvin Harrison was going to fall to me down there, especially if you mentioned him. That has not been the case. So
it's annoying that
we've got 2 running backs. 2 wide receivers, tight end, our QB, and our 2 flex. So as I've used a round 1 pick on a running back, I'm probably not going to go running back again here. I'm certainly not going to go quarterback for any point for a little while. It seems I've gone early with tight end. So I think I'm probably going to double tap on wide receiver here. And I'm going to go for a couple of players that maybe the jury's still out and I might be higher on than others. So there's been a lot of positive talk about Williams so far during the off season, and I think we saw flashes of things that excited me last season as well. I think if he can just maybe chill out a little bit and grow up, I think it's an attitude thing. I think concerns a lot with that comes out of him. But then the next player I'm going to go for, just looking at vacated targets and especially looking at vacated red zone targets, Devontae Adams just feels like a huge value for me around at the start of round 4. And I think, yes, Nakua is the ram that everyone's going to be targeting for receivers, but you just look at the work that was going around 2 Cup when he was in last season, and Devontae Adams is coming into a role that is really well suited to him, and I just think that is going to really convert into some real big fancy weeks. Will he be consistent? Possibly not. But if you want the week in, week out consistent, you need to take your wide receiver a bit early in the round 4, don't you?
Yeah, I think I like that pick. I think he's the solid player in that sort of area where you kind of go like Jameson Williams. You talked about there's going to be a lot of ups and downs. if you've got Jameson Williams on your roster in the year, there's going to be a lot of weeks where you delighted and just as many weeks when you're really disappointed and wondering what happened to him. But I don't think you're getting that with Devontae Adams. It gives you a little bit more of a safe floor, I think. I think he'll do well for the Rams.
Who are you going to look at for your next pick? So Jalen Hurts is off the board. Would you be thinking about quarterback at this stage, Ian, or
Well,
other skill positions?
So Joe Burrow is quite tempting. However, I am high on George Kittle this year. I think he's got a real good chance of finishing as tight end 1 this year, and to get him in the 4th round of a draft, I'm actually pretty pleased about. My thinking is that if CMC is playing well, George Kittle will also play well, because they're going to have to put extra men down in the box to counteract CMC, which is going to open up intermediate routes for George Kittle. So I think if they're both playing, they're both going to do well. So I'm high on George Kittle this year.
I think George Kittle, he quietly got on with a really efficient year last year, didn't he? And he gave you some real good fancy weeks as well. And I don't think, because of just how much Brock Bowers was doing, I don't think we spoke about Kittle enough, really, did we?
No, it's a really good point, actually. We don't, because Brock Bowers was breaking records all over the place, and Kittle just kind of went under the radar.
And I was just looking, so he had his highest yardage total since 2018. 2019, he was being billed as the new Travis Kelce, and he was the heir apparent to that tight end 1 throne. Tight end 2 last year, behind a world-class season from Brock Bowers as well. So, yeah, I think round 4, considering Trey McBride's gone at the end of round 2, I think it does represent some really nice value there. Mixon off next. Obviously, that'll be interesting how that shakes out with him sharing the backfield with Chubb, DJ Moore, Alvin Kamara. I mean, Alvin Kamara, no matter when he gets picked every single year, seems to return solid value. Will this be the drop-off year? Kenneth Walker, and then you have a trio of wide receivers so far, Pete. Are you going to add a 4th?
Well, Pete was going to take Breece Hall at this point last round.
You
must be pretty pleased that Breece Hall's still there, Pete.
I am, but he still makes me nervous, mate. I'm not going to lie. So, what tempted it is to take another wide receiver. I'm not going to do that. I am going to look at running back. I was I'm looking at. I mean, I was looking a little bit at Joe Burrow, and I would be tempted to take Joe Burrow. The only reason I'm not going to take Joe Burrow is I do like a stack, and I quite like all of the quarterbacks that link up with the 3 wide receivers I've got. Yeah. So I've got options later on for a stack. So I'm going to take James Cook instead, because I think there's a lot's been said about James Cook not having a contract and not turning up, but I think it'll be sorted by the start of September. I think they'll come to an agreement, and I think he's a massive part of that team and that team scoring points. So I'm going to stick with. I'm going to go with a running back to get one on the board. This is the part where Ian's right. I like to take wide receivers, and then I get to like round 4 or 5 and start panicking that I haven't got a running back. So.
I think if there's one thing we can take away from the last 3 or 4 off seasons, it is that a running back removing their team from their social media and putting their house up for sale doesn't actually mean anything, does it? It seems to get done at some time. And if Cook does end up moving on, if someone's trading for it, it's because they want him to be their key running back as well, isn't it? So, yeah, you'd expect that shouldn't be too risky. Before we move on, though, just a quick mention for the TH Fantasy Football Bestball Bonanza 2025. At the time of recording, we have only 6 days left to sign up and get yourself involved to raise money for an amazing local charity, Beast of Memory Cafe, supports those who live with dementia and their carers. We are creeping up towards 7,000 raised all time and moving towards 2,500 raised on the year so far. So check yourself in the comments below and get yourself signed up. We will be forever grateful. But also, we'll just quickly remove that. Also, whilst you are doing that, if you also want to head over to Jefferson My Drinks Fancy Podcast on YouTube, why don't you watch the video and check out the shows that the boys putting out? What does the off season hold for you, gentlemen? What are you going to be putting out on your YouTube channel?
We've just done a mock ourselves. We did a Bestball, a JTT Cup Bestball mock last week. So if you're in another charity competition, if you're entering that and you want to watch us completely mess that up, then that was worth a listen. And I think we're doing another with plans to do a couple more mocks. We'll probably do a redraft mock at some point. And then we'll have a couple of shows where we did our bold predictions last year, which went quite well from what I can remember. We got a few of them right. So, and we'll do our division winners and things like that.
Amazing. And yeah, huge shout out to Matt Cullen and the JTT team. They are very close at the time we go to record to hitting 50,000 all time, which is an amazing achievement for the Joshua Tarrant Trust. And you're right, an amazing charity bestball competition that was one of the reasons we set up the CH Fantasy Football Bestball Bonanza as well. So yeah, huge shout out to Matt and the team for the amazing work that they continue to do. However, Pete, you have 29 seconds left to make your fifth pick of our mock.
So it's running back or wide receiver now, and as tempted as George Pickens is, as I've already got CeeDee Lamb, I'm going to go Devonta Smith and get my fourth receiver. I'm happy with James Cook as my running back, so I'll go back to wide receiver and Devonta Smith. Devonta Smith's a bit more Jameson Williams for me. I think there's going to be ups and downs along the way, but I think as my fourth wide receiver, I'm okay with that. I think I've got a pretty safe floor with the other three.
Yeah, I really like Devon Smith pick, and with AJ Brown, he's creeping up in years. I don't think that's going to impact him as much this year. It depends how much reading on the sidelines he needs to get done, whether Devon Smith gets a bit more action as a result of that. We shall see. But yeah, I like Devon Smith as a pick there. Amari Hampton off the board in 5. I love Amari Hampton, but that feels a little bit high to me for redraft with Najee Harris there. James Conner next. Sam Laporta going at 5'8". That would have been steal of the century, would have thought, in redraft last year. That seems a little bit more appropriate as value so far with current ADP. And then Chris Olave, and I have no idea whether Chris Olave will return value. That could be a screaming value at the round 5. It could be about right. It could be a massive overpay. I'm really hoping for a big year for Chris Olave this year, though. Ian, you've got quite a nice rounded start to this draft. You've got wide receiver, 2 running backs, and a tight end. What are you thinking for pick number 5?
Well, we're at the point now. It's a funny part of the draft where the only person here that I'm really, really interested in is David Montgomery. And I think that's more of a nostalgia reason for picking David Montgomery. I don't think there's any way he can replicate the season he had last year. He's very touchdown dependent. And I think those touchdowns are going to regress a bit more this year. So as much as I love David Montgomery, I'm steering clear of him as much as I can this year. I'm not really a massive fan of Pickens. That is a personal thing. I think he's an absolute idiot. But I am quite high on Ted McMillan. I think he's got a good chance of delivering a decent season. Bryce Young finished the year on a high, and Ted McMillan, alongside the other receivers they've got there, that could be a really exciting offense to watch.
Yeah, agreed. I think McMillan is a really good foil for Bryce Young. I'm really looking forward to seeing how those two connect this season. It's one of my favourite things. I'm looking forward to seeing how that shapes out, because I think I'm a believer that this will be the year for Bryce Young, and Ted McMillan is going to be a big part of that. I completely agree on George Pickens. I think now is a really fair place to take George Pickens, but I cannot stand him. I don't know whether, being a Bengals fan, is that an AFC North hatred of the Steelers? I imagine he's still got that Steelers stink on him for me. Actually, yeah, I know it's not the way to go at winning fantasy, but there is a case to be made, especially when you're doing a mock and you're not actually sat with the team, picking players you like at times. And I just don't want to cheer on George Pickens at any point. I don't want to at any point be happy George Pickens has scored a touchdown.
Yeah, I totally get that. But he's making picks where if they have a bad week, can you live with yourself?
Yeah.
And if you pick guys that you like, you can kind of live with that.
I also think there's, especially with NFL fantasy football, I think there's enough players and enough options that if there's just somebody you don't like, I've had it, Ian will tell you, I've had it for years with Tyreek Hill, can't stand the guy. And even as good a quality player as he was, there's ways around, you can pick other options and not make it suffer too much. So, yeah, I think if you don't like the guy, just don't pick him, because nobody wants to be cheering and hoping for a big week out of someone they don't like on a team they don't like.
Next up, I am going to make the pick that you did not make, and I am going to take Monty at this stage. Will he have the same season as last year? No, I agree. I don't think he will. But I think for those big weeks as my RB2, exactly the same point we just made about living with those. If Monty has a bad week, I can forgive Monty for anything. But he's one of my absolute favourite players. If he lets me down, it'll be someone else's fault. That's fine. Monty can do no wrong in my eyes. So I'm happy to have Monty as my RB2. Next is the point where I'm looking at another wide receiver. I'm looking at ADP. It would go George Pickens, Travis Hunter, Waddle, then Addison. I'm not comfortable taking Travis Hunter at this point. I don't want to take George Pickens, as we've already discussed. So I think that looking at Waddle and looking at Addison is where I'm at. And we said a couple of weeks ago when we recorded a Dynasty startup that we felt Waddle and Addison were about the same player at this stage. And for Dynasty, I still think they are. However, it's looking increasingly like that Addison is going to be missing probably a minimum of 3 games for his DUI. Can I wait for someone on my bench for 3 weeks? No, I really don't think I can. And I think he is going to, once that's announced, I think we'll probably see him drop into a point where I'd be more comfortable to take him. But that does mean at this point, then instead, I will take Jalen Waddle. And if Tyreek Hill does make his way out, I think I'll be very, very happy with that pick. Is Tyreek Hill the player of old? Not really. And that shift to Waddle may well happen this season as well when it comes to targets. Travis Hunter does go next off the board. So speaking of Travis Hunter, where would you two feel comfortable taking him?
If I'm honest, not at all.
Yeah,
I think my personal opinion is that he's a better corner than he is a receiver. And I think he'll play more snaps on defense than he will on offense. So if he's going to take time off to rest during a game, it will be while the offense is on the field. And I don't want that in my fantasy team, because I will just be watching Red Zone, or I might even watch the full game, and I will be screaming at the telly saying, get Travis Hunter on the field. And I don't want to spend my Sunday evenings like that.
Yeah, that was always my... Go on.
I think he fits into support similar to a few other players. I think he's never going to drop to a point where I'm happy to take him. I think there's always going to be one of the 12 who is more confident in than I will ever be. So I don't think I'm ever going to have to make the decision of if I want to take him, because would I think about it around 7 and 8? Probably. Will he be there around 7 and 8? Probably not. I don't see that happening, because someone will be more confident. Yeah, I absolutely agree. If I'm taking player, I want to know is at least going to be getting a high portion of that. And maybe after this year, we will change that when we've seen, but there's too much unknown about that. Where are you at with him, Pete?
I was going to say exactly what you just said. I think when you look, and I think the perfect example is if you look down in terms of ADP, who's at the top of the wide receivers now, it's similar players in terms of they are the second choice wide receiver on the whole for their team, but at least they're the second choice wide receiver that you know is going to be on the field 90% of the time. So I'm not sure I want to be taking the second choice wide receiver for the Jags, who might spend half his time resting because he's been playing on defense. It's too much of a gamble. If he fell to the 8th or 9th round, I'd be possibly looking at him, because then you're looking at him in amongst some different wide receivers. But that whole list that you go down there, I'm just kind of like, yeah, I'd take every single one of those over Travis Hunter. So he's never going to fall far enough for me to take him, I don't think.
And I think it is a Brian Thomas question as well, isn't it? If Travis Hunter was in with a shout of being the wide receiver 1 on his team, regardless of stat count, it'd be more tempting. But when you've got Brian Thomas on the field, you're not going to need to rely on Hunter as much there, are you, as well? But that leaves you in with your 6th pick. You've got your starting spots filled. Are you going to move to have a look at flex, or are you tempted with quarterback?
No, I'm going to pick up another running back. So I was torn between Judkins and Henderson. So I want to roll the dice on a rookie running back. And if in a toss-up between the two, I prefer Judkins around here. I think the uncertainty at quarterback at Cleveland plays into a more run-heavy offense. Henderson has got to compete with Ramondre Stevenson. I know Ramondre Stevenson had a terrible year and basically fumbled the job away last season, but he's still kicking around. I think Judkins has got a shout of having some incredible volume, depending on who the quarterback ends up being.
Yeah, I agree. I love Hampton. Henderson is firmly in shout of being a my guy for Dynasty, but I would take Judkins over both of those in redraft. One of his real skill sets is that he's like a wrecking ball when it comes to those touches in within 5 yards. He could well outperform all those other running backs for fantasy based purely on touchdowns if he gets enough of that work. Jerome Ford, I'm sorry, I've trusted Jerome Ford for the last 3 or 4 years, thinking this is the time. He's constantly letting me down.
Yeah, it's not happening.
Right, who's going to be passing the ball? The more likely option for Cleveland to get touchdowns is probably going to be get as close to the 5 as we can, pass it to Judkins, and that's realistically something that could be their main game plan outside of Njoku. So yeah, great pick there. Mahomes gone next. That seems more sensible for Mahomes than previous redraft years where we've seen him go in as one of the top 2 or 3. Pacheco, TJ Hawkinson could be a really good tight end pick there after a down season last season when he came back from injury. George Pickens is finally off the board. We don't have to think about him anymore and selecting him. And you are up next, Pete, with your 4 wide receivers and a running back. Is it panic for another running back time, or is there someone else you've got your eye on?
Having almost picked Pickens in the last round, I would have struggled not to pick him. So I'm glad somebody's taken that. Sometimes you get sniped and it hurts. That at that point, I'm quite glad someone's taken him to stop me taking him. So I am looking at running backs. I agree with everything Ian said. I think Judkins is a better shout than Henderson, but I was one of the few who, or one of those that bought into Ramondre Stevenson last year off the back of the new contract and him having the backfield to himself. And boy, did he disappoint. So off the back of that, I'm convinced he's not very good. So it might take a week and a half, but I think Henderson will eventually come through. And it won't take that long for him to take over that team in what I think will be a pretty run-heavy team, despite the fact that I quite like Drake May.
I think Hampton, Henderson are picks that people will start to get a little bit twitchy on maybe as we move through September. But I think you're right. I think as we get into October time, they'll turn out to be really good picks as they get settled in. I'm not sure what sort of bias that is, where you pick someone based on someone else disappointing you, like vengeance bias, maybe. But yeah, there are those little things that sit in your head, don't they, when you're picking players? So picking him out of spite is as good a reason as making any pick.
Yeah, it's not a
no, but it's one that I can buy into. Godwin off next. Godwin's a player I'm finding really, really interesting because it seemed like he was guaranteed to be backing in for a massive workload again after signing that contract, and we have heard nothing since, which just feels a little bit unusual and makes me worry a little bit. I'm also worried about Team 4's build at this stage as we enter 7 rounds. They have 6 wide receivers. They're obviously stockpiling for trades. Aaron Jones, I like Aaron Jones at pick 6, especially where Team 3 have him as their first flex play. Addison off the board once again. I think that'll prove to be far too high if and when that ban comes in. Baker, then Pollard, Judy, Swift, and Odunze have gone off next. Odunze is a player that I'm really looking forward to seeing what he does this year, and he's another one that I think that could reflect really good value by the time we get to the end of the season. Where are we going next, Pete?
There's a few wide receivers I like, but I'm going to go another rookie running back. I think in the same way we've just talked about Judkins and Henderson, I think Caleb Johnson's got a really good chance of having the majority of that workload at the Steelers for a team that wants to run the ball. I think Jaylen Warren has had countless opportunities to take over and show them that he can be the one, and I just don't think he's got it in him. So I think eventually, again, it might be a slow start to the season, and the same with Henderson. And I might need to find a sort of starting running back later in the draft. But I think Caleb Johnson, by the end of the year, him and Henderson should both be the starting running backs for their team.
Yeah, I suppose you can copy and paste what I said about Ford for Jaylen Warren as well, can't you? There is, like you say, he's had his chance moving, it's not come through. So taking Caleb Johnson, the Steelers obviously aren't convinced either. Travis Kelce has gone next. That's going to be another interesting one to see what happens there. I'm a believer in Noah Gray, and I'm interested to see whether we see Noah Gray transition into that role this year for the Chiefs. Ridley, Robinson, Shakir, and then back over to you for your 7th pick, Ian.
Yeah, and I'm going receiver, and it's a receiver that I think is going to have a huge year with the upgrade at quarterback at the Raiders. We have got Jacoby Myers, who I think could have an incredible year this year.
Yeah, great shout on Myers. He's another player who had quietly had a nice season last season, and yeah, with that upgrade, he could be a really, really interesting pick there, especially when you've got him in the flex spot as well. That's the sort of player that you can feel comfortable having the flex, and will likely, if you did have a tough matchup, you'd have someone on your bench plug in for those weeks, won't you? I think Myers was a player that cropped up a lot in DFS for me last season as being a decent value pick in those matchups.
Yeah.
Tyrone Tracy going next. What? Sorry, Pete.
No, I was just going to say he's one of those players that the majority of people are just like, yeah, he's not very good, but he always puts up good numbers. So
Yeah.
it's like he never rises in drafts. It's like it's almost as if he's like an unsexy pick to take in drafts. It's like you just feel a bit dirty when you've taken him, but he will give you the numbers. So it's a great pick.
It's like the opposite of Gabe Davis, isn't he? Gabe Davis inexplicably gets loads of attention for doing nothing all the time, and Myers gets ignored for quietly being quite good all the time. Tyrone Tracy off next. I'm really interested to see the Tracy Scatterboo combination, see how that works this year. Scatterboo is a player that, yes, he went a bit later, but I think it's really interesting. So I'm really curious to see how that shakes out. Looking next, and so if I was looking at my wide receivers, I'd be looking around Reed, Mooney, and Pearsall. Looking at my running backs, I'll be looking at Warren, Scatterbo, and Williams. And I don't think I'm quite ready to go quarterback yet still. So I think I am going to go wide receiver. I'm going to stick on brand for a player that I have spoken about almost every single show we've done through the off season. And I really believe that Ricky Pearsall is in with a shout of staking a claim to that wide receiver 1 spot in San Francisco, especially with Brandon Ayuk out. And Jennings, it doesn't convince me. He had that massive week last year. I think it was over 40 points. And then he had a couple of other good weeks. But he also had a lot of weeks outside the top 50 wide receivers, whereas Pearsall, small sample size, but he was reliable with the targets he received towards the end of the last season. And I'm interested to see how he kicks on. And a year 2 wide receiver is one of my favourite picks to be taken at this point as well. At this stage as well, then I think I might go again for a wide receiver. And I suppose this is similar to my Devontae Adams take, but just a little bit higher risk. I really like Cooper Kupp landing in Seattle, and I think this is probably a lot higher than a lot of people would take him.
Yeah.
But I like him there. And once again, looking at my lineup, I'm now in a situation where I'm going to have Pearsall, Kupp as either flex or bench, and I'm very comfortable having Cooper Kupp as a plug and play flex option each week.
Oh yeah, I like both of those picks, to be honest.
I think the question marks on Kupp are more around Sam Darnold and whether Sam Darnold is actually a better quarterback now and just needed a few years to sort of gain a bit more experience and get a little bit more confidence, or whether it was all because he was playing in McConnell's system for the Vikings and everybody looks good in that system. And I mean, you were going to know pretty quickly, but I think that's the only question mark for me with Kupp and all the Seahawks is, are they going to, they've completely redone the offense. Are they going to come out firing, or are we actually going to find out that Darnold's not as good as he looked last year at times?
Jonnu Smith goes next. Over to you, Ian, for your 8th pick.
Yeah, so Bo Nix is awfully tempting at this point. I think he had such a good year. They've upgraded at tight end. Evan Engram's a huge, reliable target for a quarterback. But I'm going to roll the dice and hope that someone else makes it back to me. And I'm saying that knowing that Pete's already stated that he's going to try and go for a stack. So he might just leave Jared Goff alone and be nice for me. Even though he doesn't do much running.
There's no way you're targeting Jared Goff.
But with me taking Jaden Reed now, who is someone Pete is high on, he might sting me for it.
Yeah, Reed. I like Reed's pick there. Once again, when you're looking at the players that you sat with there in the flex spot, Reed is an interesting one. And I think I'm just always worried about picking any wide receiver associated to Packers because it seems almost impossible to call week in, week out who will be. Throw Matthew Golden into the mix as well. By no means am I a believer in Matthew Golden. Jury's out on him, certainly for me to have seen what he can do. But yeah, Reed could be very interesting there. Mark Andrews off next. It'd be once again, what's that splitting like with Isaiah Likely in Dynasty? I put Andrews and Likely side by side. I think round 8 reflects fair value for the risk at this point for Andrews. Deebo Samuel, once again, a bit uncertain there what's going to happen in Washington, but he could be interesting. Bo Nix does go off next, and then Jalen Warren. So, Pete, over to you. Are you taking Jared Goff with your 8th pick?
No, I wanted Jaden Reed, so now I'm just irritated. The problem I've got here is, I think, and obviously we've got 4 picks left. I need a quarterback and I need a tight end. What I'm learning is I should have taken McBride in the second because outside of the top 3, I just don't really know who I'm interested in at tight end. So there's a couple of people that I think that have been taking shots on in Bestball and I think are worth a shout. But for a redraft, I really want someone who I really believe in. And apparently,
it's got to be Tyler Warren. It's got to be Tyler Warren, mate.
Listen, when you've got Daniel Jones throwing you the ball, I'm not sure you can believe in any of them. That said, I am going to go for a Colt, and I'm going to go for a wide receiver who I think has got a really good chance of breaking through. And if Daniel Jones can find a bit of connection and find a little bit of consistency, I think Josh Downs could have a really good year. And as my 5th wide receiver, I'm quite happy to sit him on the bench for a few weeks and see if that connection's there and see if he blows up a little bit.
I think Josh Downs is absolutely going to have 4, maybe 5 solid weeks, a couple of mega weeks, and then it'll be the ones in between and make sure you plugged them into the right place, isn't it? But yeah. I mean, Daniel Jones, it's a running joke on our show how high I've been on Danny Dimes, and I think he is better than he's been given credit for. And how much of the Daniel Jones problems were due to just the Giants? Actually, will he be better in a different setup? That'll be what we'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I like Downs as a gamble pick there. Harris, Ayuk off next. That's a long time to wait potentially for Ayuk coming back in after injury when we're thinking potentially it's going to be middle of the season, and then what reports you look at. ETN, Diggs and Golden off for team 1. Evan Engram, that's an interesting pick at tight end. I think one thing I'm realizing as we go through this, that I'm really happy that I've taken tight end and can forget about it because there are still plenty of quarterbacks I'm interested in taking. But tight end is getting a little bit tricky at this point, isn't it? Would Engram have been in your reckoning for tight end if he'd still been sat there, Pete?
Yeah, I do like Evan Engram. So he would have been. Ingram's in a bucket for me with Njoku and Kincaid as the sort of ones I like, and then it's a case of do you take a gamble on one of the rookies? And I mean, obviously being a Colts fan, I'd probably prefer Warren over Loveland. But I'm gonna leave the tight. No, I'm not gonna leave the tight end. I'm gonna go for Njoku. I'm gonna put that to bed and get David Njoku because I think he should be.
What?
And I was also working. To be fair, I was working on the basis that there's only you two need a quarterback, and then one of those teams has just taken a second quarterback.
There's a strong case we made here for AI listening in. It's clearly Sleeper have got Siri working for them here. The fact Team 7 have taken Bo Nix and then Jared Goff back to back is outrageous.
What is that?
Ian.
What is that?
I reckon we draft
people who do that.
So yeah, when we're talking about quarterbacks, then at what point in 1 QB for redraft would you be thinking about taking a second quarterback? So obviously we're looking here at only filling 3 of the bench spots for this mock. When would you be considering a second quarterback?
For me personally, it's got to be a double-digit round at least, maybe 12 onwards for my second QB. But it depends on how the draft goes and who you're drafting with. So people start going double QB early. If there's a guy there that you really like, you're going to have to reach and pick him up. But then again, if people are going early and they're doing double QBs, you can wait longer than you normally would, knowing that they're not going to dip back in for a third QB around the 12th round. or might they? They might. I don't know.
I think for me, if I'm taking any of my tier 1 or tier 2 wide receivers, so Allen Jackson, Daniels, Hurts, Burrow, if I'm taking any of those, I'm not going to pick up a backup QB. There will always, if something goes wrong, there will always be someone on the waiver wire. There'll always be a backup QB I can go for, because there is no chance on any matchup I'm starting someone over them. If I'm taking a Bo Nix later on, I probably will want to pick up someone for streaming. But yeah, absolutely. If I take Bo Nix in the 8, I am not taking a backup QB in the 9. I'd agree with you. Probably wait until around 12. What about you, Pete?
I agree with you. I think if I had one of the top 5 that finishes with Burrow, if you're looking at the board here, I'd like one of those top 5, in which case you're playing them every week, so you don't want to take up a bench spot with someone else. If I end up taking a Kyler Murray or a Bo Nix or someone a little bit later, then I'm with Ian. I think I would take a second. I would take a second quarterback, but I wouldn't be I'd be ideally not taking him until the 12th or 13th round. Just before you start picking kickers and defenses, I don't want to be taking another wide receiver when I could be another quarterback when I could be getting a wide receiver or a running back that's going to do a job for me.
So Ian, you've not got Goff there. Who's it going to be?
So I'd be more than happy at this point to wait for Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, or Dak Prescott as my QB1. If I hadn't have loaded up on Niners players earlier in the draft, but to not take Brock Purdy when I'm backing Kittle and McCaffrey would be bordering on stupidity.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we talk about stacks a lot more when it comes to Bestball and DFSO, but there's certainly that case to be made there as well. And when you've got those two pieces, chances that a touchdown is going to CMC or Kittle, yeah, it's high probability, isn't it? A good proportion of those. So doubling up on those points, you're right, it seems like a no-brainer. I'm thinking about QB here. I mean, at this stage, when everybody has a QB off the board except for Pete, there's probably 3 here I'd be happy with. So there are times I would consider waiting until it came back to me at 10. But after seeing the nonsense of Team 7, I think I'm going to go for my QB here. I'm going to go for a player that you've mentioned, and a player that I think is representing pretty good value at this stage as well, if he remains injury-free. And I'm going to be taking, where is it? I have to scroll down for him as well. I'm going to go down on my queue instead. I'm going to be going for Dak Prescott with my pick. Oh, it's not letting me pick him.
That's the one I want.
There we go. So yeah, I'm taking Dak at this stage. I just think at that point he seems like a decent value, and obviously he's missed time, but he's shown time and time again. Looking at the wide receivers he's got as well, he's got everything in front of him to have a really good season. So I'm happy to take Dak at that stage there. And then I could do with another running back at this point, and I think I'm not entirely sold on Kenneth Walker. I think that there could be a bit of a transition this season to Charbonnet coming in a little bit more. And Charbonnet did amazingly well in the games last year where Walker was out. So I'm going to take that gamble on Zach Charbonnet as my RB3 and my first skill position bench spot as well. Caleb Williams has gone next. So yeah, team 2 double up on wide receiver quite early. Over to you, Ian, for your penultimate pick.
Yeah, so I'm looking at Javonte Williams, and Pete will tell you that I am not Javonte Williams' biggest fan. In fact, the word hate has been used several times in the past. But he is currently the Cowboys' number 1 running back, provided he can stay injury free. I know they just drafted Jaden Blue, who might overtake him at some point. But if Javonte Williams takes the ball week 1, performs again week 2, is really hard to overlook, and he could provide some really good value down here in the draft. That being said, I do really like Darnell Mooney. As a wide receiver 2 behind Drake London,
Yeah.
I'm not expecting anything from Kyle Pitts again this year. And I think it's going to be those 2 receivers just blowing the roof off. So I'm in a bit of a pickle, really, on who I would take. I'm going to go running back. I'm going to take Javonte Williams and hate myself for it.
So there's one thing that we often is there a route to success? And there is absolutely a route to success. It's just there's a high probability Javonte Williams will trip over whilst walking down that route and then be injured for a little bit.
Yep.
But yeah, we've been talking for years, haven't we, that we want post Zeke a solid running back in Dallas to bring some fantasy glory. If Javonte Williams doesn't have a good season this season, it's probably the last we will speak of him in fantasy circles, isn't it? Herbert goes next. So yeah, teams are doubling up on those quarterbacks. So I'm glad I took Dak when I did. Darnell Mooney does go next. Once again, solid value, as you said, just behind Drake London. I think he'll have some really good weeks. Tucker Craft, Team 7. Not sure what Team 7's playing. Now they've doubled up at tight end and quarterback. I'm only in round 10, so they're having an absolute nightmare. Emeka Egbuka, a player that I am really interested to see how he fits into that offense. Definitely the future, definitely a solid dynasty pick. Represents risk for redraft, but when you're starting to fill your bench spots, as far as risks go, he's a risky pick that's got a high ceiling potential. So I do quite like that from Team 6. Pete, you have 2 picks left. Where are you going with 10? Are you going to take your QB here, or are you going to hope that teams 1 to 4 don't double up?
I wanted Prescott, Herbert, or Justin Fields. And as the other 2 have now gone, I mean, none of those 4 teams should be taking Justin Fields in this round, but let's face it, they're probably going to now I've said it. So I'm just going to, rather than gambling around the corner, because I think my last pick will be a little bit more of a long shot anyway. So rather than gambling, I will just take Justin Fields here and make sure I've got that stack with Garrett Wilson that I think could be pretty explosive, together with his ability to put some rushing yards up.
Yeah, I mean, Justin Fields, considering he was in a new offense last year, in his 6 games, he still came away with 3 QB1 finishes on those weeks, including the QB1 overall in week 4. Yeah. Given the full run of the season, a little bit of trust, a bit of nurture, if that's what the Jets are able to do with him, we've said constantly he's a better player for fantasy than he is in real life, but is in a setup where hopefully he can kick on without not to look over his shoulder with Russ waiting for him this time. Yeah, I like Fields as a pick there. CJ Stroud goes again. So yeah, chances are I think Fields probably would have gone if Stroud's gone where he's gone there. Pittman, Bigsby, Coleman.
Sorry, I said to Pete last week about Justin Fields. Last year at the Steelers, it was a Russell Wilson playbook with some stuff for Fields chucked in.
Yeah,
he's now in a position where the playbook is for him, and the team will get the best version of Justin Fields that we'll probably have seen since he joined the NFL.
Yeah, I really like Justin Fields, so I'm really hoping that works out for him there, because he's just an exciting player to watch, isn't he? And he's an exciting player to watch that is fruitful for fantasy as well. So that's what we are keen to see. Kincaid and Ferguson have gone off next as teams 3 and 4 take their tight ends. Your final pick, Pete.
As it's I know this wouldn't be the final round if we were doing a full draft, but as it is the final round, I do like to take a bit of a gamble in the last round and just pick on someone who might go be explosive. And if not, I always think when you get to this point of the draft, you're probably going to drop them in 3 weeks anyway. So because you're going to need to bring someone else in, or someone's going to get injured or whatever, you're going to be using this player to go on to waivers. So I'd either go for a rookie that I want to sort of see what's there, or someone who I think might have an instant impact and then be straight into my team. There's a lot of choices, so I'm going to go with Leggett on the basis that I think he's already built up a little bit of chemistry with Bryce Young, and I think might take McMillan a few weeks to get into the swing of things. I think Leggett could potentially lead that wide receiver room to start the year. And if he doesn't, after 2 or 3 weeks, I'll drop him for someone who's on the waiver wire.
Yeah, and that's I think it's that thing you have to be at peace with, isn't it? That your picks from round 10 onwards are players that may well not be on your roster after a few games, and that's just how it shakes out, isn't it? So you want to take, you don't want a player that you're going to just have steady low points from. If you get this stage, you want to kind of swing for the fence a little bit. So yeah, I do like that as a Leggett pick. We'll see what happens with Ted McMillan in there as well, but that may well open the door for Leggett to kind of get some different routes and get involved. Yeah, so really like that. Drake May off next. Drake May as your backup for Josh Allen is a nice situation for Team 6 to be in. Jordan Mason, Rashad White, Dallas Goedert, and then Ian, your final pick.
Yeah, so like Pete was saying, we're probably looking now at players that might end up on the waiver wire at some point. And there's a case to be made when you get to this point in the draft, just start taking the best player available and use them as trade capital. Because some people are going to need these players. So I'm looking at maybe Jordan Love, which I know he's early to get my second QB, but he's some great trade capital there. There is also a case for me to take Jaden Blue after taking Javonte Williams in the previous round, because then at least I'm guaranteed the Cowboys running back one, regardless of what happens. But I'm going to roll the dice and go for either Trey Harris or Kyle Williams. So I do like
both of those as picks here.
The rookie wide receivers, either one of them could go off. Kyle Williams might have more chance depending on what Stefan Diggs does. And if he can keep, his nose clean, so to speak. But I do like Trey Harris with Justin Herbert.
Yeah, that's another one of those rookie picks. It's going to be really interesting how that works out. And I mean, Justin Herbert is a massive winner from the offseason so far. The weapons at his disposal now is looking so much better last year. And Trey Harris is in a position where he could potentially have a solid season. But once again, where you're taking him on the bench, you can sit and wait for him and plug him in as and when you need to. Rashid Shaheed, who was he was the hotness last season, especially with the kick return rule in Scott Fishbowl. We seem to hear about Rashid Shaheed every 3 minutes last year. He's dropping down a little bit there with the uncertainty at quarterback in New Orleans. My final pick, I think I'm going to go for, once again, something that's very on brand for me. I need another running back in there, really. RJ Harvey has gone off where he should have gone off early in the draft, but I cannot resist taking J.K. Dobbins at this point of the draft. I think he's going to have some really solid weeks. I can't help but adore J.K. Dobbins at every opportunity to have a chance to speak positively of him. And once again, as a bench player, I think he's someone that could return some good value there. I'm definitely higher than most on J.K. Dobbins, but I'm quite happy to have him on my roster. How are we feeling about our teams then, gentlemen, as we hit the end of the draft?
Pretty positive about that, to be honest. I think I'd be a bit nervous at running back. Obviously, we'd have a couple more rounds. I'd probably try and pick up another running back. But looking at what's left, there's not a lot of quality, is there? So, I mean, we talked about Henderson and Caleb Johnson both potentially starting slow. So I might be a bit short at running back. And I think the only other thing I'm looking at now, I think in hindsight, I would have taken Trey McBride in the second. I think if I swapped Lad McConkey out for Trey McBride, and then instead of taking Njoku, I'd take a Cam Scatterboo or someone like that, another option of running back. I think I would be slightly happier with it. But on the whole, I've got my stack. I've got more wide receivers than anything else, so I'm good to go.
What about you, Ian?
So I would also be nervous at the running back position, and I said it when I drafted McCaffrey. I will live or die on my teams with McCaffrey this year, because if he doesn't return to what he was 2 years ago, I'm reliant on Chase Brown, Judkins, rookie running back. They don't always work out. And then I've got Javonte Williams, who I wasn't happy about taking, but he has got a path to success. So I'm nervous with my running backs, really happy with my receivers. And I did get the San Fran super stack with CMC, Kittle, and Purdy.
Yeah, and then I'm really happy with taking Brock Bowers early at that point. It's not something I would usually, but I'm happy how the team's worked out after that. And just looking around 9, 10, I think I'm very comfortable waiting on quarterbacks this season. looking at some of the players that are available there and what you can do beforehand. Would I like Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, my roster? 100%, but I can't see me taking them in round 2 at the risk of losing a running back or wide receiver when there is such good value waiting later on. Yeah, I'm happy with that all in all. The one thing I'm not happy with is team 4. Some mega wide receivers in that mix, but I think they've had a bit of a shocker with their only 2 running backs and 2 quarterback picks there. If I were team 4, I'd be taking running backs for the remainder of the draft for however many bench spots I had left, and then waited to make a trade as well. Thank you very much for joining there, gentlemen. Pleasure drafting with you, and pleasure to have you on. Can you just remind everyone where they can find you and find your content and get involved with everything that you and the JMD team do?
Ian?
Oh, right. I thought you were okay. Yeah, fine. We are at JMD Pod.
I always do it. Oh, no, you do it.
You do this on our actual podcast. What are you doing? We are at JMD Pod on all the socials. We are Jefferson My Drinks Fantasy Podcast on YouTube. Please do come find us, like, subscribe, engage, send us some stuff. Come talk to us.
Yeah, definitely go and get yourself over. The lads put out some great shows, really enjoyable watches, or listen to however you decide to consume your content, and put on some fantastic leagues as well. Very much enjoy being involved in your 18 Dynasty leagues that you do in conjunction with JTT Cup as well. Fantastically run leagues. And it is a pleasure to have you on, gentlemen. You'll be joining us again in the off-season for our deep dive shows on the Bengals and the Colts. So thank you very much for joining us. An absolute pleasure as always. But for now, that is us done. So Malcolm, take us home.
You have been listening to Pestle and Ed of TH Fantasy Football. For more content, follow TH_fantasy_NFL on Instagram and Twitter.